Welcome guys. So in the last class we learned how to set up our project, but in this class we're going to be looking at how to set up our recycler view. Okay, so this is the complete project. So the recycler view, it's more like a list that holds items in a very structured manner. As you can see, I have two rows here in my recycler view. So what we are going to be doing in this class is to set up our recycler view. So the first thing we need to do will be to create our rows. All right, so this is a unique XML that we are reusing as our recycler view row. So the first step in setting up our recycler view will be to create these rows. So what I'm going to do here is to go to our Solution Explorer, and I'm going to go to our layout folder. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to go to new item. Here I'm going to add a new Android layout. The name will be alumni row. Right, so let's go ahead and add this. So whilst our layout is loading up, we can go ahead and start designing. So I will need some padding. So I'm going to go here and say Android.padding top 16 dp, and I need padding left and padding right. So I'm going to need to set a predefined height for our row. So the height, I'm going to set it to 115. So we'll have our linear layout set up. So inside of it, I'm going to define two relative layouts. As you can see here, the top part of the row is a relative layout, and the lower part of it is another relative layout. So we're going to use two relative layout to divide the layout into two parts, okay, so that it can help us to layer our views appropriately. So guys, let's get right into it. So I'm going to define a new relative layout. Of course, we need to assign some attribute to it. So I'm going to say android.layout height. This will be equal to 0 dp. I'm going to say the layout weight. So what this statement layout weight means is that we are actually assigning 50% of the entire space to our relative layout. So that's why we are actually making use of layout weight. It helps us to, assign, space of our views, using percentage or ratios. Okay, so as you can see right here, when I say 0.2, when I said 0.5, it means I'm assigning 60% of the entire space to my relative layout. Okay, so I'm going to set the weight. It should be match parent. So inside of our relative layout, we need a test view. So I'm going to define a test view. Of course, our test view needs some attributes. First of all, the ID. I'm going to call this name test. Layout height equal to wrap content. Layout weight is equal to wrap content as well. And the gravity. And of course, we need to put some predefined tests. I'm going to put a name of an alumni. I'm going to add some test style. I'm going to make it bold. And also we're going to need to set the size of our test, which is test size. I'm going to set it to 18 sp. So we have our first test view, as you can see it here. So the next thing we need to add will be this test, with this test view under our name. Okay, so this test view will always show the name of the department where the alumni finished from. So we're going to go ahead and add that. So first thing, I'm going to set the ID. So we're going to call this department test. So the next thing will be to set up the width and height. So we need some predefined test. So the test will be, say, Department of Economics. Okay. So guys, as you can see, our department test is showing up, but it's not well aligned. We need it to be under our name test. So I'm going to go ahead and say Android.layout below. So I'm going to go ahead and put the ID of the view I want our department test to be under or to be below. All right, so in this case we want it to be below name test. So I'm going to go ahead and put ID/name test. So as you can see, it's now properly aligned. So guys, the next thing we need to do will be to add this test view. So this test indicates the set of this alumni. When you got admitted into your university, you guys are always categorized in sets. Okay, you have the 2011 set, the 2012 set, 2013 set. So this is actually what this test view will be displaying for us. Okay, so let's go ahead and define it. So I'm going to say test view. Of course, you need some attributes. So I'm going to be a little bit quick with this so that we can round up. So guys, as you can see, our set test is also showing, but it's not properly aligned. We need it to be, somewhere around here. Remember guys that this is a relative layout. So we're gonna go ahead and say align parent right. Okay, we're gonna set this to true. So this is it. So this is showing appropriately now. So this is showing just the way we expected now. So guys, let's look at the next thing we need to do. Okay, we need to create, so now we need to add a new relative layout, and also we need, so guys, the next thing we need to do would be to add our relative layout and also the views associated with it. As you can see here, we need all these views inside of it. So guys, let's jump right into it. So what we're going to do is to say relative layout, and of course our relative layout requires some attributes. So we're going to say Android the layout height. The layout height will be equal to 0 dp, and the layout weight will be match parent, and the layout weight will be 0.5. So we're going to go ahead and add our views. Okay, so the first thing we need to add will be our test view. So we're going to have this ID as status. We're going to set the test to read status as well, and the layout height and layout width, we need to align it to the bottom part. So we have that, and we're going to add some margin to the bottom part as well. So we're going to add some margin. So let's set this to 6 dp. So it now appears that the row is actually very large, so we need to just go ahead and reduce the height. We can just set it to 100. Okay, so I think this is perfect. So let's go ahead and add another test view that will hold our status indeed. Okay, so we're going to have test view. Most times I can just go ahead and copy this. And also I'm going to change this to graduated. I'm going to change the ID to status test. Okay guys, so as you can see, this test that read graduated is already added to our views, but we want it to, start from somewhere after we have the test that read status. Then we want it to come next. Okay, so to be able to do that, we're going to say android dot layout to right of. Then we're going to go ahead and copy this ID here and paste it here. So as you can see, it's now properly aligned. So we need to add some margin as well. Now we're going to go ahead and say android dot layout margin left, and it's going to be 4 dp. Okay, so we now have this margin here. So other things we can do would be to make it bold. Android dot text style bold. Boom. So guys, the last thing we need to do will be to, add the delete icon here, right? So we're going to go ahead and add that, and that will actually be an image view rather, with some attributes. So we're going to go ahead and say android dot layout height 30 dp and layout width 30 dp as well. So the next thing will be to align it to the bottom of our view. So I'm going to say, and also I need to align it to the right. Now the next thing to do will be to add our image. So I'm going to say android.src, which will be equal to drawable slash ic delete 48 dp. So if you guys remembered, we added this earlier on. We added this earlier on in the last class. So if you've not watched the last class, I think you should go back and watch it so that you can follow through appropriately. So the next thing to do will be to add some padding to it. So because of this test, we added some margin. I'm going to have to do the same thing so the next thing to do will be to add some margin to the bottom area. Okay, as you can see, I had margin bottom for my two text views. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same for our delete icon. As you can see, everything is now properly aligned. So last but not the least is to add the divider. As you can see, this nice divider that we have here. So to do that, I'm going to come here and define a new view. So the height will be 1 dp, and the width will be match parent, and the background will use, a light ash color, something like E2, E2, E2. Okay, now because this is a relative layout, we need to align it to the bottom area. So to be able to do that, I'm gonna say android.align parent bottom. Okay, and I'm gonna set this to true. Boom. So that seems well aligned. So as you can see, this is almost exactly the same thing we have here. But the remaining part of the styling we will do when we set up our recycler view fully. So guys, let's get into the next thing. So now that we successfully design our item view, the next thing we need to do will be to really set up our recycler view indeed. So to be able to do that, we're going to have to first of all create a data model for our alumni. So to do that, I'm going to go to our Solution Explorer. Because we are really committed in keeping things pretty organized, I'm going to have to create a new folder. Hit add, new folder. So this new folder, I'm going to call it data models. Okay, so here is actually where we'll be saving all our data models. Peradventure, we'll need more than one. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and create a new class. So this new class, I'm going to call it alumni. So this class will actually hold information about each of the alumni. Okay, so now we have a new class. I'm going to go ahead and make this public. So the next thing we need to do will be to add items. So whenever I say item, I mean the alumni's full name, the department, the status, and the set and the ID as well. So to create those items, I'm going to go ahead and say public string, because the full name will definitely be a string. I'm going to have full name. And for the department and the status and the set, and lastly, we're going to give each of the item an ID. So the ID is actually very useful and important because it makes it very easy for you to track your data. In case when you want to update your data, it makes it quite very simple and easy to do. And we are actually going to be seeing all of those in this particular tutorial series. Okay, so I'm going to correct this. Okay, so now that we are done setting up our alumni data model, the next thing we need to do will be to create a recycler view adapter. And actually, we are very, very lucky because Visual Studio 2017 makes it pretty easy for us. Okay, so it more like removes all the bottlenecks and it is very simple and straight to the point. So to be able to do that, I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder. So this is actually not a mandatory way of doing things. It's just that I have a knack for keeping things really organized. I'll advise that you can possibly adopt some methods that will help you keep your codes pretty organized all the time. You know, it makes it easier for you to find things when you're looking for them. So I'm creating a new folder and I called it adapter. So this is actually where I'm going to add my alumni recycler view adapter. So we're going to go ahead and create the adapter. So to do that, I'm going to click on new item. So when you hit this page, I'm going to scroll down and look for recycler view adapter. And this is it. Now I'm going to name it alumni adapter. So our adapter is being created. So if you're actually using Visual Studio 2017, when you're adding your recycler view adapter, ensure that you have your computer connected online, because most of the time it might need, to get some nugget packages to ensure that everything is well set up for you to rock and roll. So currently I don't have recycler view, so it just added that for me and we are ready to rock and roll. So this is all the setup that we need, to hit the ground rolling in setting up our recycler view adapter. So we have almost everything that we need here. Okay, so this is the view holder. This is actually where we assign the item view we created earlier on. As you can see, we created this alumni row earlier on. So this is actually where we are going to be assigning the views. So here I'm going to say layouts inflator dot from parent dot context dot inflate bracket resource dot layout dot alumni row comma parent and false. So what we just did here was to set up our recycler view layout. Okay, so each of the rows is going to make use of this layout we defined earlier on, that we designed earlier on. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up because we don't need it anymore. So the next thing we need to do will be to reference the items we have on the row inside of this class. Okay, so we're going to go to the adapter view holder, which is what we have here, the alumni adapter view holder. So here I'm going to have to define each of the items or each of the views I have on the alumni row here. I have to declare it afresh. as you can see, Visual Studio by default, gave us some hint on what to do here. So I'm going to go ahead and say public test view. So I'm going to define name test, and I'm going to do the same thing for our status test, which is a test view as well. Okay, so the next will be our set test. And also, we wouldn't want to forget our department test, which is a test view as well. And finally, we need to define our delete button, which is an image view. So I'm going to say public image view. So we're going to call this delete button. Okay, get set. So we have that. Now, the next thing we need to do will be to reference each of these views to the one that we have in our alumni role. Okay, just the way we usually do find view by ID in our main activity, most of the time. That's actually what we are going to be doing here. So I'm going to say name test, for instance, which is a test view, will be equal to, so I'm going to cast it as test view, and I'm going to say item view dot find view by ID resource dot ID dot name test. So just a reminder, guys, we actually assign alumni role as the layout of our item view. So what I would do is to scroll up a little bit so that we can see this. So in the onCreate view holder method, this is where we assign our alumni role to our item view. So that's why we're actually saying item view don't find view by ID. So I actually want to over explain this particular concept so that we will all understand it. So the next I need to do will be to say department test equal to test view item view the find view by ID resource ID department test. Now the next thing will be our status test. Our status test will be equal to test view item view dot find view by ID resource. Now the next will be our set test. Okay, so now we have that. Finally we need to reference our delete button as well. So this is an image view. So now guys, we have all of that set up. So the next thing we need to do will be to assign values to these items. So for each of the rows, we're going to assign the name, the department test, the status test, the set test, and of course, the delete button will always be there by default. So guys, to be able to do that, we're going to go to unbind view holder. So this method is actually what assigns data to every single row in the recycler view. So to be able to do that, I'm going to go ahead and open this up. So as you can see, Visual Studio also gave us a hint on what to do here. Okay, so we are actually passing in the view holder, which is this, into this particular method. So what we need to do here is to just open this up. Okay, so once we open this up, but before we proceed to assign values to our view holder, we need to ensure that we are passing the appropriate data to our adapter. Okay, so to be able to do that, we're going to go to our constructor. So this is where the data is being passed into. So by default, Visual Studio assumes that the data you're passing into the adapter is just a string array, and that's totally wrong. So we have our own data model. We're going to go ahead and define that, and this is going to be a list of alumni. So I'm going to say list. Now I'm going to have to bring in this namespace, which is system collection generic. So now that we have that, now I'm going to go ahead and say list of alumni. So we need to also resolve this, and we're going to bring in this namespace using Xamarin Firebase, your data models. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on this. Okay, so now we have that. We're going to go ahead and call these items as well. So we're going to go ahead and leave it as items. Now we have to change this as well. We're going to have to change it to list of alumni as well. Now we're going to say items equal to data. When we say this, we'll now be in a very good place. So guys, what we are actually doing here is that we are appropriately passing in the list of our alumni into our recycler view adapter. So now the next thing we need to do will be to assign the items. Okay, So what we need to do now is to start assigning values to our view holder. So to be able to do that, I'm going to say holder dot name test. As you can see, it displayed here. So name test dot test will be equal to items dot position dot full name. Okay, so I'm going to have to do that for all the views that I have. So the next will be our department test, and the test will be equal to items position dot department. Now the next will be the status. This will be equal to items position dot status. So the next will be the set. So I have holder dot set. This will be equal to items position dot set. So I'm going to have to get rid of all of this. So this is actually a shorthand, but I actually don't want to do that. So I want to type this out so that we understand exactly what's happening here. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all of this because we don't need them anymore. Now I'm going to just have to change this to items. I actually renamed this earlier on, so that's why it's causing these issues. So if you remember, this is no longer a string array, it is now a list. So I'm going to have to change this to count. And that's all we need to do in our alumni adapter. So our alumni adapter is ready. Now we need to go to our main activity and actually pass data to it. So I'm going to save this up and go to our main activity. So guys, welcome back to the main activity. Now, the first thing we need to do will be to set up our recycler view. So to be able to do that, so I'm going to just go ahead and create a new method. I'm going to call this method setup recycler view. So this is where I'm going to go ahead and create my recycler view. So to set up our recycler view, I'm going to go ahead and say my recycler view will be equal to my recycler view dot set layout manager bracket new android support v7 widget linear layout manager, and I'm going to pass it my recycler view context. So what the linear layout manager actually means is that I want my items to be laid out in a linear format. Peradventure, I want them to be in a grid format. I can just go ahead and say grid layout manager. But for now, I just want it to be a linear layout manager, okay? So while we have our linear layout manager, I'm going to go ahead and define a new instance of alumni adapter. So I'm going to say alumni adapter. I'm going to have to resolve this first of all. I'm going to call this adapter. This will be equal to new alumni adapter. So guys, for us to actually complete this process, we need to pass in a list of alumni into our alumni adapter. If you guys remember, we made a space for that in our constructor when we are creating our alumni adapter, which is this place. So we need to pass in a list of alumni for we to actually proceed. So I'm going to go back to our main activity. So I'm going to have to create a dummy data for us to use to test out this whole process. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new method. This method, I'm going to call it create data. So the sole function of this particular method will be to generate dummy data that we can use to set up our recycler view. So what I'm going to do is to create a list of alumni as a global variable. So I'm going to go ahead and say list. I'm going to have to resolve this. I'm going to call this alumni list. This should be equal to new, and this is going to be a list of alumni. So we need to resolve this as well. And finally, I'm going to call this alumni list. Okay, boom. Okay, so I forgot to put void here. So in this create data method, so I'm going to go ahead and say alumni list will be equal to new alumni list. Now, the next thing we need to do will be to start adding dummy data into this alumni list we just created. So I'm going to say alumni list dot add. So this is more like a shorthand. So I'm going to add a new alumni like this. Department. This will be Department of Computer Science. So these are actually dummy data. So the full name will be Mark Edwards, and the ID I can just use one, and the set, let's say the set is 2011. Now the status could be graduated. So successfully added one item to our alumni list. So I could just go ahead and add more by copying this whole line. And I'm going to paste it here, paste here, and paste here. Okay, so I now have 5. So all I need to do is to just go ahead and change some of the information here. So instead of having this as computer science, I'm going to have this as civil engineering. And this is going to be John Doe, graduated as well. And say this would be Department of King Studies. Definitely the name is going to be Jon Snow. Okay, so say the ID will be 3, and this will be 2012. Say he dropped out, he went to fight, for the Iron Throne. So guys, back to business. So this will be say history, and finally I'm gonna just have to change this to Greg Williams. Say 5, 2014, and say he failed. Okay, so now we have our data ready. I'm going to have to call this method create data before I set up my recycler view so that the data is ready. So all I need to do is to pass in my alumni list into the alumni adapter constructor, and we are good to go. But that's not all. The last thing we need to do would be to say my recycler view dot set adapter. Now we're going to pass in the adapter we just created. Boom. And that's all we need to do. So guys, to verify that everything works appropriately just the way we planned it, we're going to go ahead and run our app. Okay, so we actually got an error message. It seems we have an issue with our recycler view. It seems like when we added our adapter, our Nugget package was kind of downgraded, so we need to upgrade it back to version 28. So I'm going to just go to my Nugget package manager and get this done quickly. Okay, so I'm going to right click here, click on manage Nugget package. Okay, so I'm going to have to upgrade this. I have to update this, and I have to update this as well. So I think that's all we need to do for now. So what I need to do now is to rebuild the project and try to run it again. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit rebuild. Okay, so it seems our rebuild was successful. So we're going to go ahead and try to run the app again. So our app is loading up. Okay, seems to have an error here. So this is supposed to be delete button. Okay, so I'm going to have to go to our alumni role and confirm that everything is well set. Okay, so what did we name our image view? So our image view had no ID, so I'm going to go ahead and give it an ID. I'm going to call it delete button. Bam. So we're going to save this up. Now we have to go to our adapter and correct this delete button. So now everything is well set up. I'm going to go ahead and try to run this app again. Okay, so our app is deploying. Bam. So congratulations guys, we now have our recycler view. Of course, there's still a few things we'll probably need to change. We need to set the background of our row to be white, okay? But for the most part, the basic setup of our recycler view is pretty well achieved. So all I just need to do is to make a few corrections and we'll be fine. So without wasting much time, let's go ahead and change the background of our rows to be white. So we're going to go to our alumni row, and I'm going to have to set the background. So I'm going to say Android the background. Okay, so I'm going to have to change this to white. So now that we have the background as white, I'm going to go ahead and run the app. Boom. Congratulations, guys. This is exactly what we wanted to create. This is exactly what we want to have, and we successfully set up our recycler view. So guys, in the next tutorial, we'll be adding Firebase to our apps so that this data will be coming from our Firebase database. So you stay tuned and see you in the next class.